All right, so today we're diving into something that I know a lot of people are struggling with right now.
Oh, yeah.
Nikon Z8 versus the Sony A1 Mark II,
Yeah, these are both
especially for experienced photographers looking for
really great
a
cameras.
workhorse camera.
Yeah.
The question becomes, is the extra $3,000 for that Sony really worth it?
Right.
When the Nikon is going to give you a fantastic shooting experience at basically half the price.
Exactly. I mean, both these cameras are absolute beasts, but that price gap is pretty significant. So
Yeah.
let's break it down. I think the first thing that comes to mind is resolution for making those big prints.
Okay, so the Sony is packing a 50.1 megapixel full-frame sensor,
Right.
while the Nikon comes in at 45.7 megapixels.
Right.
Is that noticeable?
So in real world shooting,
Yeah, in real-world shooting, are you really going to notice that 4.4 megapixel difference?
honestly, probably not, unless
Yeah.
you're making just massive prints.
I'm
I think
just-
where the Sony really starts to flex its muscles is with that pixel shift mode.
Okay.
They can combine 16 separate frames into this behemoth 800 megapixel image.
Oh, wow.
Nikon does this too, but
Yeah.
it only goes up to like 180 megapixels.
Okay, so 800 megapixels, I can't even imagine working with a file that big.
Wow, it's massive.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But for landscape shooters, dynamic range
Yes,
is always a huge consideration.
that's right.
And the Sony has 15 stops of dynamic range.
Yeah, the Sony is a little bit better there, especially at those lower ISOs.
Okay.
That could be the difference between, blowing out your highlights or capturing all those subtle details.
Yeah, and having the flexibility to really pull those details back in post.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about low light performance? Because
Uh-huh.
I know
That's another big one.
you shoot in a lot of low light situations.
Absolutely. I mean, for events,
Yeah.
concerts,
Right.
Anything where it gets dark.
Even just like shooting at dusk,
Totally. Yeah.
having good low light performance can make a huge difference. What do these cameras look like when the lights go down?
Interestingly enough, the Nikon actually pulls ahead here.
Really?
It has a base ISO of 64 compared to the Sony's 100.
Okay.
So you can push it a little bit further
Gotcha.
before you start seeing that noise.
Gotcha.
And,
So less noise.
Nikon also has that starlight mode,
Oh, yeah.
which allows it to autofocus in like near darkness.
Okay.
We're talking down to -9 EV.
-9 EV. That is crazy.
I know, it's like you could practically be shooting in a cave.
I mean, that for, wedding receptions,
Oh, man.
shooting in dimly lit venues,
Absolutely.
that could be a huge game changer
That's right.
for some people.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know you love capturing fast action.
I do.
So let's talk about speed
Okay.
and autofocus.
Yeah.
What are we looking at here?
Okay, so this is where things start to get interesting.
Okay.
So the Nikon actually wins on paper.
Okay.
It has a continuous shooting speed of 120 frames per second.
120 frames per second. That's amazing.
Right, but hold on.
Okay.
There's a catch.
There's always a catch.
To hit that speed, you have to sacrifice resolution
Okay.
and shoot 11 megapixel JPEGs.
Oh, so we're talking like cropped sensor.
It's an APS-C crop.
Okay.
Yeah.
And JPEGs only, so no RAW?
No RAW.
Because if I'm shooting full resolution
Yeah.
RAW, what am I looking at?
So for full frame RAW files, you're looking at 30 frames per second.
30 frames per second.
Yeah, and this is where the Sony really shines.
Yeah.
The Sony can do a steady 30 frames per second with no cropping and full resolution.
Okay, so it's more of a consistent
Yes,
performer.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it gives you that raw flexibility for editing later.
Okay, so let's talk about autofocus, because that's a
Yeah.
huge part of capturing the action as well.
It is.
What do these autofocus systems look like?
So the Sony is using 759 phase detect points across the entire sensor,
Wow.
and they're combining that with AI-powered subject recognition
Okay.
and something called human pose estimation.
Human pose estimation. What is that?
So basically it means the camera can track not just a person's face,
Right?
but the position of their limbs as well,
Oh, wow.
which makes it even better at following those fast-paced movements.
Okay.
Imagine you're shooting
A soccer player making a goal.
exactly.
Yeah.
That kind of detail can make a big difference.
And nailing the focus.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I've heard great things about the Sony's autofocus, but the Nikon's new system
Yeah.
is no slouch either.
No, it's gotten much better.
Yeah.
They claim that their subject detection and autofocus can work all the way down to that -9 EV as well. So it's
you've got
really,
unlimited dose.
it's getting much closer.
Yeah.
But in our testing, the Sony just feels a touch more sticky.
Okay, more like it's locked on.
It just locks on,
Yeah.
especially with those erratic movements.
Yep.
But if you're shooting in low light a lot,
Yeah.
that Nikon autofocus could be amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's move on to video.
Okay.
I know video is
Big part of my life.
a huge part of your workflow.
Yes.
So how do these cameras stack up?
Okay, well, this is where the Nikon really starts to flex its muscles.
Okay.
We're talking internal 8.3K 60p RAW video recording.
8.3K?
8.3K.
That's a resolution I'm not even familiar with yet.
It's a lot of data,
Yeah.
but it gives you so much flexibility in post-production. It's
Yeah.
really incredible.
Okay, so
Wow.
8.3K 60p on the Nikon.
The Sony
What about the Sony?
maxes out at 8K 30p.
Okay,
However,
there's always a however.
there's always a however.
Okay.
It makes up for it with some pretty impressive image stabilization features.
Yeah,
Up to 8.5 stops of compensation.
that's a lot.
It is.
Yeah, so I remember us talking about how stabilization is
Crucial.
absolutely crucial
Especially
for
for
handheld work.
Yeah.
So 8.5 stops on the Sony.
Correct.
What about the Nikon?
So the Nikon, unfortunately, only has 5.5 stops of stabilization.
Okay.
It's decent, but it's not.
Not in the same league.
It's not in the same league
Okay.
as the Sony.
So even though that Nikon is, giving us that 8.3K 60p RAW video,
Right.
if you need to shoot handheld
Yes.
and you don't need that raw video,
Exactly.
the Sony might be a better option.
Yeah, potentially.
Okay, so let's move away from the technical specs for a minute and talk about the viewfinder.
Okay.
The window to the camera's soul.
Yes.
What are we looking at here?
So the Sony's electronic viewfinder is just stunning.
Okay,
It's bigger, it's brighter, it has a higher resolution
then the Nikon.
than the Nikon's EVF.
Okay.
It's like looking through a window, not even an electronic display.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal for me.
Yeah,
I rely on the EVF
sure.
heavily for composing,
Yeah.
for checking focus.
Right, especially
yeah.
for those mirrorless cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about blackout free shooting?
Oh, that's another big one.
Because I can't stand missing a shot because
Yeah.
the viewfinder goes black
It's so frustrating.
between frames.
I know.
So luckily, what are we looking at here?
Both cameras offer blackout-free shooting,
Oh, thank goodness.
which is great.
Okay, so that's something I don't have to worry about.
No, you're covered no matter which one you choose.
All right.
Yep.
What about the rear LCD screen?
Yeah, so the Sony has come up with this really interesting 4-axis tilt mechanism.
Okay.
It kind of combines a regular tilt
Okay.
with a flip-out vari angle.
So you
You
get
get the best of both worlds.
the best of both worlds.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about the Nikon?
The Nikon's got like a more traditional vertical-horizontal tilt,
Okay.
so it might be a little bit limiting
Yeah.
for some people.
Depending on what you're shooting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but, it still gets the job done.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, that might be all they need.
Exactly.
All right, so we've covered resolution, we've covered low light performance,
Right.
speed, autofocus, video capabilities,
Yeah.
viewfinders,
Yeah.
rear LCD screens.
What's next?
What else do we need to consider?
Let's talk about storage and power.
Okay.
So both cameras have dual card slots,
Okay.
but they use different formats.
Okay, what are we talking about?
So the Sony uses the newer CF Express Type A format,
Okay.
while the Nikon uses the more common CF Express Type B.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like Type B is generally...
Yeah, Type B is generally faster
Yeah.
and cheaper.
Okay.
So even though the Sony has that newer technology,
Yeah.
the Nikon's solution might actually be
More practical.
more practical, more affordable.
Yeah, especially if you're shooting,
Right.
high-resolution video.
Yeah,
You need those fast cards.
absolutely.
Okay, so speaking of budget,
Yeah.
let's talk about battery life,
Oh, yeah, that's always a big one.
especially on longer shoots.
Right.
How long can I expect to be shooting with these cameras?
Okay, so that's actually one area where the Nikon falls a bit short.
Really?
It only gets about 340 shots per charge
Okay.
compared to the Sony's 530
Oh, wow.
when using the EVF.
So you're going to want to have...
Definitely pack extra batteries.
If you're shooting with the Nikon for a full day.
For sure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of
We've covered a lot.
technical specs.
Yeah.
Numbers on a spec sheet don't always tell the whole story.
Right.
So let's talk about what it's actually like to shoot with these cameras.
Yeah, let's get into the experience.
The handling,
And all the good stuff.
yeah, all that good stuff.
Right.
We'll get into that in the next part.
Awesome. So we talked about the specs and all that, but you know what it really comes down to is how these cameras feel in your hand.
Yeah, and how easy they are to actually use.
Right, exactly. Because you could have the most amazing camera in the world.
Right.
But if the menu system is a nightmare or the buttons are all in the wrong place.
Yeah, or it's just not comfortable to hold.
Right.
It's going to be a frustrating experience.
Totally. And that can really affect your creativity and your ability to get the shot.
Yeah. So let's talk about the ergonomics. How do the Z8 and the A1 II compare when it comes to like the actual physical design and the handling?
So, I mean, both these cameras are built for professionals, right? They've
Sure.
got weather sealing, they've got really robust build quality.
You feel good in the hand.
Right, they feel good in the hand, but there are some subtle differences.
All right.
The Nikon is a little bit larger
Uh-huh.
and heavier than the Sony.
Which makes sense. I mean, it's got that more traditional
Yeah, kind of DSLR.
DSLR style body.
Yeah.
I've always been a fan of dedicated dials and buttons
Oh, yeah, me too.
for quickly accessing settings. You
Yeah.
know, I don't want to be digging through menus.
Exactly. You want to be able to change your ISO or your shutter speed on the fly.
Yeah, while I'm looking through the viewfinder.
Right.
So what about the Sony? Does it have a similar control layout?
Not quite.
No?
The Sony is definitely more streamlined.
Okay.
They've gone with fewer physical controls, and they really emphasize the touchscreen interface.
Okay, so that can be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, it really depends on your personal preference.
Yeah.
I know some photographers who absolutely love the Sony's minimalist design,
Right.
but others find it a little bit too menu-driven.
Yeah, I could see that being a little bit of an adjustment
Yeah,
if you're used to having all those dials and buttons.
especially for those coming from a DSLR background.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Okay, so speaking of personal preference,
yeah.
let's talk about the grip.
Okay.
How do they feel in the hand?
So the Sony's grip is a bit deeper
Okay.
and more contoured,
Yeah,
which some people find more comfortable.
especially for people with larger hands.
Yeah, exactly. Or
Yeah.
if you're shooting for longer periods of time.
Yeah.
Now, the Nikon does offer an optional battery grip,
Right?
which can improve the handling and give you some extra power.
But it adds bulk and weight as well.
Yeah, it does make the camera bigger.
Yeah. So I guess if you're prioritizing portability,
Right.
keeping things small and light,
Yeah,
maybe the Sony has an advantage there.
potentially.
But if you like that more substantial grip,
Yeah, that kind of DSLR feel.
the Nikon with the grip
Yeah,
might be the way to go.
exactly. It's all about personal preference.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the actual shooting experience.
Yeah.
How do these cameras feel when you're out there capturing images?
Well, they're both incredibly fast
Okay.
and responsive.
Yeah.
I mean, there's practically no lag between pressing the shutter button
Yeah.
and actually taking the picture.
That's what you want.
You want that immediacy,
Yeah.
right? Especially when you're shooting action.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to miss the shot because the camera's lagging behind.
Totally.
But are there any nuances to the shooting experience that are worth noting?
Yeah, actually, so the Sony boasts true blackout-free shooting
Okay.
in both the viewfinder and the LCD,
Yeah.
thanks to its electronic shutter,
Okay, and I remember us talking about how blackout-free shooting is like a game changer
especially
for fast-paced action.
right, for sports, for wildlife.
Weddings?
Anything where you need to see what's happening continuously. Yeah.
Exactly. So what about the Nikon? Does it offer something similar?
It does.
Okay.
And it achieves it through an incredibly fast sensor readout speed.
Okay, so even though it doesn't have an electronic shutter,
Right.
it's so fast.
It's so fast that it's essentially blackout free
Okay.
as well.
In practical terms, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah. In practical terms, you're not going to notice a difference.
Okay, but there is a difference in the technology,
Right.
right?
Right.
I mean, the Sony's electronic shutter also allows for silent shooting,
you got it.
which can be a huge advantage
Absolutely.
in certain situations.
Like street photography,
Yeah.
wildlife, weddings where you don't want to distract people.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
some shutter noise.
Okay, so that's definitely a point in favor of the Sony
Yeah,
for those types of shooting scenarios.
for sure.
Okay, so what about buffer capacity?
Yeah.
Because if I'm shooting high-speed action,
Yeah,
I need a camera that can keep up,
absolutely.
right, and not slow down.
You don't want to miss those shots because the buffer's full.
Yeah, exactly. So how do these cameras stack up?
So the Nikon has an insane buffer.
Okay.
It can capture over 1,000 RAW files at 20 frames per second.
1,000 RAW files
I know.
at 20 frames per second.
Before the buffer fills up.
That's incredible.
I know, it's really impressive.
So if you're shooting a cheetah
Yeah.
sprinting across the savannah, you're going to be able to get a lot of shots.
You can just rattle them off.
Yeah, and increase your
Oh.
chances of getting that perfect
Perfect moment.
moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the Sony? Can it keep up with that?
The Sony is no slouch. Either.
Okay.
It can capture 100 lossless compressed RAW files at 30 frames per second.
Okay.
Which is still really good, but
So not 1,000.
it's not 1,000.
Yeah.
So if you're shooting a lot of high-speed action,
Yeah.
the Nikon definitely has the edge there.
Okay, so we've talked about the autofocus specs,
Right.
but I'm curious about how these systems actually perform in real-world shooting.
Yeah, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. So in our testing, the Sony's autofocus was just consistently impressive.
Oh.
I mean, it's fast, it's accurate,
Yeah.
and it's really tenacious,
Okay.
especially when tracking moving subjects.
So it just locks on.
It just locks on and
Yeah.
it doesn't let go.
And you were saying earlier that the AI-powered subject recognition
Right.
is a big part of that.
I mean, it works really well.
Yeah.
The human pose estimation is also pretty impressive.
Okay.
It really feels like the camera is anticipating your next move,
Right.
and it's ready to capture that perfect shot.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
But is the Nikon that far behind?
I mean, it's close.
Okay.
It's also very fast
Yeah.
and accurate,
Right.
and the deep learning algorithms do a good job of identifying subject,
Okay.
but it's just not quite as sticky as the Sony,
Gotcha.
especially with erratic movements
Yeah.
or in those really complex scenes.
Okay. So it's like you're saying that if you absolutely need to nail the focus on that one crucial shot,
Yeah.
maybe the Sony gives you a slightly higher chance of success.
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, think about it. Like, you're photographing a bird in flight
Right.
or a football player making a game-winning catch.
Yeah.
You need to nail that focus.
Yeah. Those are the moments
Those are the moments.
where it really matters.
Right.
Okay, so the Nikon's autofocus is very good,
Yeah.
but the Sony seems to be like,
Pushing the boundaries.
yeah, but pushing the boundaries of what's possible right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's shift gears back to video for a minute.
Okay.
We talked about how the Nikon has the edge in resolution and frame rates
Right.
with that 8.3K 60p RAW video.
Yeah, that's a beast.
But I remember you mentioning that RAW footage gives you a lot of flexibility
Oh,
in
yeah.
post-production.
So much flexibility. You can adjust the colors, the exposure.
Yeah.
You can even pull stills from the video.
That's incredible.
It's amazing.
Yeah, okay, so the Sony maxes out at 8K 30p,
Right.
but it makes up for it with that incredible image stabilization.
That's right.
We talked about the 8.5 stops of compensation,
Yeah.
but I'm curious about those active and dynamic active modes that you mentioned.
Oh, yeah. Those are really cool.
Can you elaborate on those a little bit?
So basically, they're designed to smooth out handheld footage,
Okay.
even if you're walking or running.
Okay.
Um,
So like run and gun style shooting?
exactly, like documentary work, travel vlogs,
Yeah.
anything where you need to be moving,
Yeah.
and you want that smooth cinematic look.
Yeah. And you don't want to have to use a gimbal.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So those are definitely a big deal
They're really impressive.
for handheld shooters.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned the Sony has a breathing compensation feature.
Oh, yeah, that's another great one.
I've always struggled with focus breathing,
Yeah, it can be really distracting.
especially when you're changing focus points during a shot.
Right, it makes your video look amateurish.
Yeah, it's like that pulsing.
Yeah, that pulsing effect.
So how does the Sony's breathing compensation work?
So basically, it just mitigates that problem,
Okay.
and it results in much cleaner, more
Yeah.
professional-looking footage.
Okay, so it sounds like the Nikon might be the resolution and frame rate king.
Yeah.
But the Sony has all these other features
Yeah.
that make it really easy to capture great looking video.
Especially handheld.
Yeah.
It's all about giving you the tools to create the look you want.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here,
Yeah, we have.
from ergonomics and handling
Right.
to image stabilization and autofocus performance.
Yeah,
But we haven't really talked about the price.
that's the big one.
Yeah. Can the Sony really justify costing twice as much as the Nikon?
That's the question we're going to answer in our final segment.
Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room.
The price tag.
Yeah, the price.
Yeah.
That Sony A1 Mark II is
Mhm.
coming in at a cool $6,499.99.
It's a lot.
And the Nikon Z8 is almost half that,
Yeah, almost half.
at $3,499.95.
It's a big difference.
So is that extra $3,000 for the Sony really worth it?
Well, I mean, it really depends on your needs as a photographer, right?
Yeah.
You know, you said you're a working photographer.
Yeah.
Do you need that extra edge in autofocus
Yeah.
and stabilization that
Yeah.
the Sony offers?
Yeah.
Or are the Nikon's, low light capabilities and resolution more important?
Yeah, because there's no denying that the Sony is an incredible camera.
It's a beast.
You know, that 800 megapixel pixel shift mode is just mind-blowing.
It's insane.
And the autofocus is like
It's like glue.
Yeah, it's tenacious.
It's incredible.
It just locks on and doesn't let go.
Yeah, and the image stabilization is amazing.
But is all of that worth double the price?
Well, it could be,
Hmm.
especially if you're shooting professionally
Yeah.
and you need those features to get the job done.
Right, because if you miss a shot,
Yeah,
because your autofocus hesitated or your footage is shaky,
that could be a problem.
yeah, you could lose a client.
Yeah, you could miss that one crucial moment.
Yeah.
And that could be the difference between success and failure.
But the Nikon Z8 is still an amazing camera.
Oh, absolutely.
It's going to deliver fantastic image quality.
Yeah.
It's got those super fast shooting speeds.
Right.
And that 8.3K raw video is no joke.
It's impressive.
Yeah. So for a lot of people,
Yeah,
that's going to be more than enough.
for sure.
And here's the thing. Technology
Moves fast.
moves so fast.
I know.
What's top of the line today
Right.
might be considered mid-range in a couple of years.
Exactly.
So if you go with the Nikon,
Yeah.
you might be able to upgrade to a newer model sooner.
Right, and save some money in the long run.
Yeah, and that money you save on the body,
Yeah.
you can invest in lenses.
Lenses, lighting, marketing.
Yeah, all the things that are really going to
Help your business.
help your business grow.
Grow. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just about the camera. It's about the whole ecosystem.
The whole ecosystem.
Yeah, so the best camera for you
Yeah.
is the one that fits your needs, your budget, and your shooting style.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We really have.
Yeah. We've gone deep into the specs. We've talked about the real-world shooting experience.
With the value.
Yeah, the price, the value, everything.
Yeah.
Hopefully this has helped you make a decision.
Yeah, I hope so.
Or at least given you some things to think about.
Absolutely.
So here's a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
With technology moving so quickly,
Right?
is it always the best strategy to buy the absolute latest and greatest? Or could strategically leapfrogging models actually be a smarter way to go?
That's a great point.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
All right, so until next time, happy shooting, everyone.
Happy shooting.